data is telling us that mitigation is working.
We were already living paycheck to paycheck.
He was too naive or too stupid to be the commanding officer of a ship like this.
The Prime Minister is in safe hands.
This campaign is coming to an end. Our movement is not.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday Today on this April 12th, an Easter Sunday unlike any of us ever has celebrated. I'm Willie Geist, working remotely again this morning, hoping you and your family are connecting, if not physically gathering on this holiday. Pope Francis is doing something he's never done before, performing a solitary Easter Mass inside a virtually empty St. Peter's Basilica. The Mass live streamed into the homes of millions around the world. Here are the latest headlines on this Sunday morning. The U.S. now has surpassed Italy as the country with the most total deaths from coronavirus. More than 20,000 people have died of COVID-19, and more than 500,000 Americans have contracted the virus. For the first time in history, all 50 states are under a major disaster declaration this morning. On Saturday, President Trump declared Wyoming a disaster area. That is the last state to receive the designation. And some good news for Americans awaiting a stimulus check from the federal government. The first round of economic impact payments were deposited directly into bank accounts on Saturday. The IRS says it is issuing the money as quickly as it can. But let's begin this morning with the news that more people have died of coronavirus in the United States than in any other country in the world. But there is some encouraging news on this Easter Sunday. Let's get the latest from NBC's Kathy Park. She is outside of the iconic St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, which is hosting a very different Easter celebration today. Kathy, good morning.
Willie, good morning to you. Typically on Easter Sunday, thousands of people would be going through this cathedral, but because of the coronavirus outbreak, a change of plans. This morning's Mass will be streamed online, giving people a chance to stay connected, even while staying apart.
This morning, a surreal scene. Pope Francis celebrating Easter Mass, presiding over a near-empty St. Peter's Basilica. His blessings live streamed as the world watches from home. A message of hope as America reaches more grim milestones in its ongoing battle against the coronavirus. The U.S. now leading the world in deaths, topping 20,000. And all 50 states are under a major disaster declaration for the first time ever. Still, some encouraging signs in hard-hit New York.
The number of hospitalizations appears to have hit an apex.
Progress, but the single-day death toll jumped again to a staggering 783.
It is stabilizing at an horrific rate.
For those out of work, help is on the way. The IRS began depositing coronavirus relief checks, tweeting, "We'll continue issuing them as fast as we can." And while reopening the country may be on the radar, officials from coast to coast are not relaxing the rules. Los Angeles extended its stay-at-home order until May 15th, the longest of any city. Michigan now banning visits to friends and relatives. And all New Jersey train passengers must wear a face covering. Philadelphia changed its mask policy on its transit system and will no longer enforce it after outrage over this video. Police officers can be seen dragging a man from the bus for allegedly not wearing a mask. Even though the pandemic put a pause on our daily routines, new challenges turn into comic relief.
And live from Zoom, it's sometime between March and August.
The SNL cast reunited remotely with a special appearance from at-home host Tom Hanks, who tested positive for the virus in mid-March and found a way to lift our spirits with a dose of laughter.
I have been more like America's dad than ever before, since no one wants to be around me very long, and I make people uncomfortable.
And here in New York City, the Easter Parade is an annual tradition that takes place right here on Fifth Avenue. But because of the ongoing social distancing guidelines, this event will now be celebrated on social media. Willie?
All right, good to see Tom Hanks looking good. Kathy Park outside St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. Kathy, thank you. Let's bring in now NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar. She's a doctor of internal medicine specializing in rheumatology, but she's spent several days over the past week working on a COVID floor at NYU Langone Hospital in New York City. Dr. Azar, it is so great to see you. Thank you for the work you've stepped up to do inside that hospital. We've heard about the problems with personal protective equipment. We've heard about the problems with ventilators. What is your experience over the last week? What did you see and hear on that floor?
Yeah, well, first, Willie, let me just I just need to acknowledge my colleagues and healthcare workers all across the nation who've been doing this since day one. What I did last week really just feels like a drop in the bucket. And I will also say that there are many, many times as a trainee, as a medical student, as a doctor, where you feel like it's such a privilege to take care of these patients. And last week truly was that for me. To your question, some observations that I thought were really, really interesting was this like dichotomy between reporting on something and then actually going to the proverbial front line and seeing what it was really like. And, what happened in my hospital isn't necessarily reflective of what's happening in the nation. But I will say that, for example, we talk about these two distinct groups of patients who declare themselves quite early, those who do well and those who decline very rapidly. And that was certainly the case. A couple of other things that I think are worth mentioning. We talk a lot about how these patients are so isolated, and it's so true. The patients that we were taking care of were each in their own individual rooms. The number of times that healthcare workers were asked to or needed to go in to be by the bedside was really restricted, because each time we did that, we did have to don and then doff the PPE. And we had enough supply, thank goodness. The ventilator issue wasn't an issue for us at NYU at the moment, but we were always told to be very, very careful that we didn't want to squander those resources. And then lastly, I would just say that the collaboration, again, between the nurses and respiratory therapists and all the doctors and all the people involved in the patient care, it really was a matrix that was keeping the whole thing together. And I just have the utmost respect and admiration for all of those people.
Well, it's incredible, and we appreciate the account from inside. I want to ask you quickly, Natalie, about the bigger picture and flattening the curve. We've heard hospitalizations are down in New York. That's good news. Deaths are up, which the governor has called a lagging indicator. Where do you see this headed next nationally?
So, I think that the trajectory epidemiologically is exactly what we were anticipating, that the social distancing would end up helping to flatten the curve, and that we will see, hopefully, to get on that other side of the curve. But as Dr. Fauci always says, I think it's such a good way to describe it, now is not the time to take the foot off of the pedal. You can analogize it to so many different things. I've said, if you're undergoing chemo for cancer, you wouldn't stop that as soon as there was a tumor response. And I think that is very, very apt here. I think there are a lot of issues that are at play in terms of, or a lot of considerations, I should say, about reopening the economy. Some are medical, some are public health related. The testing, do we still have enough, out there to test for acute infection, and also antibody testing for surveillance? I think there's a lot of factors that need to be considered, before we start reopening. And those are the kinds of things that we will be thinking about in the weeks to come.
Well, Dr. Azar, we've known you as a friend and a colleague over all these years on so many medical stories, and we're so proud of you for running to the front lines this week. Great to see you.
Thanks, Willie.
All right, Natalie, we'll see you soon. President Trump, meanwhile, is spending this Easter Sunday at the White House. This is the day, of course, the president previously had hoped to get the country back into the pews. NBC's Kelly O'Donnell is at the White House with more. Kelly, good morning.
Good morning, Willie. President Trump said in a Saturday night phone interview with Fox News Channel that he believes the number of deaths in the U.S. could ultimately be below some of those early projected models, and that his decision to get people out of their homes will be led by facts and instinct. On this Easter Sunday, the president said he will watch church services on a laptop and announced plans to electronically join the First Baptist Church of Dallas and Pastor Robert Jeffers, who has been part of the president's Evangelical Advisory Board. Jeffers tweeted that he's honored that President Trump will be the first president to worship with his church online. President Trump also urged local communities that want to hold in-person services today to avoid that and instead follow stay-at-home orders and not gather together physically to prevent spreading the virus. coronavirus. Tuesday, the president is expected to announce plans to form a council to help decide some of the next steps for reopening the country's economy when lifting restrictions is deemed safe. Right now, we know the federal guidelines run through April 30th. The New York Times laid out a timeline of early warnings and disagreements within the administration about the likely magnitude of this outbreak going back to January and February. The White House responded that the president took bold action. And happy Easter to you, Willie.
And same to you, Kelly O'Donnell. Happy Easter. Kelly at the White House for us, as always. Thanks so much. Chuck Todd is NBC's political director and moderator of Meet the Press. Chuck, good morning. Good to see you. We know that the president's instinct is to get the country back to work. He's talked about reopening the economy, not something, of course, he can do unilaterally. He's been pulled back by his scientists, Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, saying not so fast, at least on this Easter deadline he had originally set. How soon do you think he really will make this push to try to get some people in the country back to work?
Well, Willie, it appears to be sort of two paths that we're headed on. I think on one hand, it feels like we're having a repeat of what President Trump was like at the end of March when he was talking about Easter, talking about today as the day of reopening things. And you saw that it was almost like a collective attempt by the entire task force and even some governors around the country and lawmakers on both sides of the aisle trying to pull the president back very slowly and very gently. And it feels like we're getting a similar situation because the president expresses his desires. And what are we seeing? The scientific experts are quietly pushing back. You see the New York Times get their hands on a lot of, we have a big story today where they got their hands on a lot of internal communications back and forth. But a couple of days ago, they also got some projections of what would happen if we lifted social distancing too soon. It is pretty clear to me that there are plenty of people inside this administration that are panicked about lifting this too early, and they seem to be sending the president a message through the press.
Yeah, and the other side of this, you have business leaders and some talk radio and TV hosts pushing Donald Trump to open the country again to the extent he can. Chuck, thanks so much. We will look for much more, of course, this morning on Meet the Press when Chuck is joined by FDA Commissioner Dr. Stephen Hahn. And as we head to break, our photo of the week, a brilliant light in the sky on Tuesday night, the April pink supermoon. The biggest and brightest moon of the year, appearing even bigger and brighter than usual this week, and seen in this stunning image behind the silhouette of an eagle sitting on a branch at Chatfield State Park in Littleton, Colorado.